Every coaster enthusiast seems to have that one coaster that they think is super underrated, and similarly, one that they think gets way too much hype. Now, I haven't been on many coasters, but I've still got my fair share of such rides on my credit list. So I thought, let's be like every other theme park YouTuber on planet Earth and count down my top 5 overrated and top 5 underrated coasters that I've been on. Now, of course, this is all my own opinion, and if you think my most overrated coaster is actually really underrated, then I'm all for having an argument, we'll say a friendly discussion, in the comments. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. Starting off with my number 5 most overrated coaster, I've put the Swarm at Thorpe Park, but in all honesty, I still absolutely love this ride. The theming's great, it's butter smooth, and it packs in some great elements. However, some people think that the Swarm is one of the best coasters in the UK, and that I wouldn't agree with. In fact, it lands outside my UK top 5, and I've ridden very little of what the country has to offer. So, why do I think the Swarm is overrated? Well, it's a very short ride. It doesn't offer a ton of force, the exception being that insane helix over the water, and those vest restraints can tighten on you significantly during the layout. Overall, while I still rate the Swarm massively, I certainly don't rate it as highly as some other people. My number 5 most underrated coaster is 13 in Alton Towers. This Intamin family coaster certainly doesn't have a strong main layout, but it has lots of tricks up its sleeve to make it a very immersive experience overall. Starting in the queue line, with an amazing soundtrack and great views of Rita in the outdoor section, and a great dark section with awesome theming in the indoor section. And this is before you even get on. There's also a great drop track with some serious ejector airtime, plus an equally strong first drop and a completely disorientating backwards dark section, which all lead to the ride experience actually being very long. People have definitely been known to hate on this ride, with some saying it doesn't even deserve the secret weapon badge. Personally, I find it's a fun ride with some great theming. At my number 4 most overrated spot, I've put Vampire at Chessington. Once again, this is a ride that I don't hate at all. It's a great family coaster with some awesome theming, but with some ranking it over some of the Merlin thrill coasters, and some even calling it the best coaster in the UK. I feel it's become a little overrated. It's definitely not got the strongest of layouts, it's pretty rough on some days, and its consistent one-train ops when the layout is 3 minutes long is pretty frustrating. In fact, I wouldn't even label Vampire as the best ride at Chessington, and I put it closer to the coaster under it, Rattlesnake, than over it, Dragon's Fury. However, if you see my Vampire review, I have found a new love for this ride after marathoning it during Winter's Tale, and overall, it's a solid family coaster, but nothing too special. My number 4 most underrated spot is going to the Runaway Mine Train at Alton Towers. This map-powered coaster is definitely the tamest coaster on this list, but while I was ready to write this off as a generic family coaster, it pleasantly surprised me with what it had to offer. For starters, the area soundtrack is legendary, and the theming overall is pretty good too. Most of the layout is pretty standard powered coaster stuff, although there is that one helix that it takes with quite some speed. But the highlight, and the thing that got it on this list, is that tunnel dive. You feel like you're flying as you enter that dark tunnel, and you pull some serious positive G-forces. To top it all off, it interacts with the rapids a lot, sometimes passing right beside it, following the same route. A genuinely decent coaster that I have a soft spot for. The fact that it's a 2-lap special when it really didn't need to be seals it for me. Taking the number 3 most overrated spot is Oblivion at Alton Towers. This was the first B&M dive coaster ever built, and I'd say I set my expectations about right for this ride. I'd seen POVs going into this ride, and I knew it was about 10 seconds from drop to brake run, so I certainly wasn't going in expecting a world-class ride. Honestly, when I got off this ride, my expectations were exceeded, as it's insanely forceful pulling out of the drop, and its views are great. However, this is still my lowest ranked thrill coaster at Towers, just because I can't look past that shortness, and with some even labelling it as the best ride in the park, I do see it as a little overrated, at least in my opinion. At the number 3 most underrated spot, I've put Turbo at Brighton Pier, a ride which people frequently label the worst coaster in the UK, but personally, I quite enjoyed my ride on it. It's certainly not the roughest coaster in the country, but instead was pretty smooth on my one middle row ride. It also ran pretty fast on the day I went, and also had some pretty good, non-restrictive over-the-shoulder restraints. There are some flaws to Turbo however, with the main ones being its short ride duration and its lack of any forces whatsoever, but all things considered, this is one coaster that pleasantly surprised me, and it's definitely not one you should skip if you're in the area. My number 2 most overrated ride is Nemesis Inferno at Thorpe Park. This B&M invert has some great inversions to it, along with some great theming, so why is this great coaster so overrated? It's really down to the curse its name brings. I still really think they benefit from a rebrand and simply calling it Inferno. Anyways, as that'll likely never happen, I'm reviewing it as a Nemesis, and I just don't think it stacks up to the original. It's got some good qualities, sure, but Nemesis is just so much more of a complete package, with more force, better terrain usage, and a smoother ride experience overall. With some people now labelling Inferno as better than the original. This ride has actually managed to become a little overrated. At the number 2 underrated spot, I put Colossus at Thorpe Park. This 2002 Intamin has definitely gained a lot more respect over the last few years, but most people still label this ride as old, rough, and one that needs to go. However, I'm the exact opposite of those people, as I absolutely love Colossus. With great theming, a fairly smooth ride experience, and a great mix of forces, the only thing that I can think of that the ride's missing is new trains with lap bars. It's also a pretty significant coaster, being the island's first thrill coaster, and it definitely stood the test of time, still pulling in some of the longest queues in the park, although that could be down to those awful dispatches. With some people praying for this ride to be torn down, I definitely think this ride is severely underrated, and I hope it stays for the long haul at an ever-changing Thorpe Park. And now we have my number 1 most overrated coaster, and I've put Wicker Man at Alton Towers. This GCI does have some great qualities, and it was still better than I expected, but some people rate this ride way too highly for a family coaster. This is to be expected with any coaster, but what really confuses me are the people that call this the best themed ride in the UK, because I genuinely don't see how. Yes, the theming centerpiece, station and pre-show are all done well, but other than that, there really isn't a lot, with the queue in most of the ride being pretty much unthemed. But also, there is some great competition in the UK, such as Nemesis, the Smiler, Saw and the Swarm, which I would argue were all better themed than this coaster. A decent coaster for the families, but nothing at all like what some people make it out to be, and it's a middle of the road coaster at Towers. And my number 1 most underrated coaster is Rita at Alton Towers, which is often flat out hated in the coaster community. But as is the theme with this list, I massively enjoyed this coaster, and it actually ranks higher than any other coaster I've mentioned on this list, beating other quality rides such as the Swarm, Wicker Man and Nemesis Inferno. The reason I rank this ride so highly is because the ride's just a complete package, with a great launch, great theming, a great soundtrack, great positives, great airtime, great restraints, and great smoothness. This certainly isn't a ride to be underestimated when you go to Alton Towers, and there's a reason why it attracts some of the longest queues in the park. I think Alton Towers has a winner on their hands with Rita, and I genuinely don't get the amount of hate this ride gets. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment, as these are what motivate me to make more videos like these that I spend hours on. We also have a lot more exciting videos planned, so you want to stay tuned for those. Anyways, with that all being said, that's me, signing off.